Hello, next level crew. It's been a while. I've been sick, and PlanetsCon has happened, and lots of stuff has happened, but I'd like to get back to looking at our game. It's turn 20, so I'm going to do a evaluation of where I'm at. As you can see, I've had a couple players share intel with me, and that's so I could help them with their development. We've had a couple new players join us. Petard as the Federation and Sotho as the Rebels. So my turn 20 evaluation, I am the Fascists, and my planets are 26. And if I look in the score, you can see that puts me kind of at the bottom of the pack. That's not where I usually like to be. I prefer to be maybe up in the 30s, somewhere in the middle of the pack. Within 2 turns of my homeworld, I have 15 planets. So when you go to my star map, that's this circle here. So I have 15 planets within 2 warp 9 jumps of my homeworld. So I'm looking at those 15 planets, and I'm trying to figure out, do I have them colonized? Are they producing minerals? Have they been producing for a while now? Are they producing mega credits? Do they have star bases on them? Am I pumping out ships regularly? Things like that. So of those 15 planets within 2 turns, one of them is uncolonized. So that's good. One of them here is an amorphous with 97 degrees. If it was amorphous, I normally would colonize it, but because it's 97 degrees and amorphous, that's going to be very difficult to colonize. I may even pop it, but we'll see. Currently producing minerals. 12 of my 15 planets are producing minerals. So that's good. Some of them are underproducing, and that's 7 of them. So of those 12, 5 are producing well. I have the right amount of, like this one has 200 mines, so I have the right amount of mines to produce as much of that tritanium as I can get. While other ones that are producing maybe down here, this one could use more mines to produce more fuel and more duranium. And I think there's a few others like that too that are, and I said 7 of them. 7 of them are underproducing or not producing at all. So this is probably one of the worst things about my situation right now. And I only have 2 bases, you can see in the next section. And this is because of this, because I have too many planets that are underproducing. And what caused that was way back in turn 3 or whatever, I did not build my base. I decided, oh, let's go check this planet. Oh, let's go check this planet. And then I finally built my base. So that large D-size freighter, instead of just spending 1 turn moving here and dropping everything, it wasted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns wandering about my cluster. In those 6 turns, it could have been colonizing my inner planets and getting them going, and then moving on to colonize these ones. And even further than that, I didn't get into this cluster early enough to colonize it and develop it. And so rebels were able to hyper jump in, colonize all those planets, and I had to actually go in and fight them and take them out to sort of eradicate them from my own home cluster. And I should have been in there. If that had been the Borg, if the Cyborg had done that, he would have killed off some really good Bovinoids, some more really good Bovinoids, some good feudal or siliconoids, and even some gypsodals. So he would have killed off all those natives if I hadn't got there soon enough. So that blunder at the beginning of wandering about, of not making a decision with that large space freighter, hurt me tremendously. So if you are going to build that second starbase, do not wait many, many turns to move it around, find the perfect spot. Just go to the next planet, build that starbase, and start popping out freighters. Or at the very least, maybe move 2 planets and drop on the second one you find. But that's still, your largely space freighter is still being occupied for a longer period of time, and it's harder for it to expand and grow these other planets. I only have 5 possible money planets. I do have them producing. There's a couple up here, and then I discovered this one here. But again, I discovered this one quite late, and I didn't get it producing fast enough because that starbase situation. I should have already found this more earlier and get out more minerals at an earlier time. Okay, so bases I have 2, and they are both regularly producing ships. So sometimes you have like, oh, I got 5 or 6 bases, but only 2 of them are producing. Personally, I don't see the point in that if you have like all these bases not doing anything. In production queue or the PPQ, it can be helpful to build up production points. So that's a valid, and not just valid, that's a very good tactic to do. But especially in classic and ones where you're not going to get a lot of production points to spend later, it's not good to just have your starbases doing nothing. They should be producing something. And I do have 2 more in development. Again, I think I would have had 4 by now if it hadn't been for my slowness at the start. Regularly producing Tech 10 warships. 0. So none of my bases are producing Victorious class battleships every turn. At this point, at turn 20, because the turn limit's probably going to, or should usually hit at turn 25, I should be producing Victorious class battleships regularly. I am not, and so that is another major issue on my development. And as a fascist, I have 0 starbases regularly producing glory devices, GDs. And I should have 1, at least that's my preference, to have at least 1 base continually producing glory devices, because they're a very important weapon. So I am producing some, but it's sporadically, and it's in between producing other ships. So I don't have 1 starbase dedicated to popping them out. And my ships. So I have a total of 32 ships. And I'm going to do a part 2 to this video, and I'm going to show some other of my games that I won, games that I lost. I'm going to show some higher level players and what they have on turn 20 and what they have on turn 25, and to give you an idea of how to gauge what that means. But right now I have 32 ships, and I have because of my star bases I only have 2. I might get 1 or 2 more. I predict that I have a possible turn 25 total of 40 to 43 ships, and that's what I'm going to end up with to fight the rest of the game. Anything else after that, I have to build with priority points. I have to use priority points to build, or I have to get a build when another ship gets blown up. So this is kind of like your fleet. This is your main starting point, and where you're gonna, and it will determine your next course of action. It will determine how your diplomatic negotiations go. It'll determine how your first combat, your first war with someone goes. And so on the scoreboard, I said I have 21 warships. On the scoreboard, I have 11 freighters. That's a fairly low amount of freighters. So of my 21 warships, 4 of them are defensive ships, which means they have low engines, they can't go too far, they're probably just going to hang around home and defend my home planets. And I have 13 offensive warships. They have good engines, they have good weapons, and they're probably going to be pushed forward to attack enemies. I only have 4 glory devices. 3 of them are mobile, which means they can intercept and explode. And only one of them has Star Drive 1 engine, so it's not really able to intercept as well. And this again is the worst thing about my situation right now is I have 0 Tech 10 capital ships, the Victorious. 0. None of them. Exclamation point. Medium deep space freighters, I have 8. 4 short range, which means they have like Nova Drive 5 engines, so low tech engines, so they can only move around within a small cluster, and 4 of them are long range, so they have higher tech engines. Same with my large deep space freighter. I have 3, 1 short, 2 long. I should have more large deep space freighters in this, but because of my slow development, and I only have 2 starbases, my homeworld, which should be producing more large deep space freighters, is producing warships. So I point that out because I'm trying to show how being indecisive in those first few turns has affected everything in my empire and has slowed down my production all over my empire. And overall, if you go to your dashboard and you go to starships, you can sort by hull. So you can see there's my 4 glory devices. I have a bunch of cloakers. I have a few Ilwins, and I have no Victorious class battleships, and those are all my freighters. If you go to engine, you can sort it by engine and see that most of my ships, Quantum Drive 7 engines are good, but they are still a little bit slow. So, and I'm doing that because my minerals are so low. And that's because I haven't developed all my planets well enough. And I have quite a few that are in Overdrive 5. So overall, I would say that my empire is a bit on the slow side, because I only have a few ships with transwarp drives. And if I look at my beams, using the same dashboard feature, I can look at the beams and sort it by beams. And you can see I choose plasma bolts because of fast beams, and plasma bolts hurt more. So basically I have all low tech, tech 1, tech 2 beams, so I have no sweeping power at all, which is not a good thing. You should have at least some disruptors, and you should be trying to get out heavy blasters, heavy disruptors, and heavy phasers. But again, poor development means I have put out a poor amount of beams on my ships. They're just, all of them are low tech. I should have a few with better tech. And you can say the same thing about my torpedoes. I managed to get out a few Mark 7s, but most are Mark 4s. So I'm a little on the weak side with my torpedo damage. And when you have lower tech, you need more torpedoes to destroy something, so you end up burning through minerals faster and money. So that's why people bump up to Mark 7 and Mark 8. But that said, I believe that, especially the fascists, that an empire can still do pretty good with Mark 4s. Even if all your ships are Mark 4s, you can still do pretty good. Especially with the production queue, because you can use priority points to put out beam weapons, you can use priority points to put out your Mark 7 and Mark 8 photon torpedoes. So let's look at my overall expansion. And so I had a late second starbase build that wasted time on my large deep space freighter. All my close planets were not developed fast enough. My MC planets were not discovered early enough. And so that all hurt my economy. Partly because it's a mentor game, partly because of my slow development, I withheld attacks on the cyborgs and the rebels. So these guys are danger to me, and so are the cyborg over here. I should have already had ships out there attacking them, but I didn't because I held back. So in a real game, if you're one of these torpedo races and you're not out there attacking, then they're going to attack you first, and then you're in trouble. Because once he gets biocides or once the rushes start coming in here, I'm on the defensive. It's much harder for me to combat that than it is for me to attack and get in there and destroy his economy. And I lost one large deep space freighter because I was here it is right here, running away. I sent it across a gap and I didn't really hide its movements, so the cyborg hyper jumped in and took it. The rebels were going to do that to me earlier, but they didn't. I wasn't really hiding anything because it's a mentor game, so I was actually curious to see if anybody would come take it. And somebody did, but that majorly hurt me, so I lost one of my large deep space freighters. One positive thing is I retook territory that I should have already colonized. So the rebels came in here and grabbed all this, and I just retook it all. And I should have taken it earlier, so it's kind of a mistake, but at least I have it all back, and now I can rebuild this area and work on continuing to attack the rebels. And I am starting infiltration. You can see my green ships are spreading out now, but I should have already been doing that probably 5 to 10 turns ago. So overall, it really doesn't look good for me. I'm in a position, I have a low planet count. My ship count isn't very strong, so I'm probably going to play a secondary role later on. It doesn't mean you can't win. It doesn't mean you're going to just get wiped out. So don't just give up just because your initial economy wasn't very good. So don't give up with that. Just keep pushing and you can do it. Like, one thing to do is to look at the scoreboard and look at everybody else's and evaluate yourself based on where everybody else is. So privateers have 40 ships. I mean, that's normal, right? Because they can pop out really cheap ships. Cyborg have 31, 23, 16, 32. Well, that's me, 32, 17. So 32, 30, 31. So I actually have the most ships of everybody on the board. Again, the 6 starbases and 45 planets of the cyborg is dangerous. He's spreading out quite a bit, so he needs to be taken care of. And this is normal for the privateers as well, to go out and grab a lot of planets. He's in a good position to be producing quite a lot of ships, especially if he gets out a couple more bases. So anyway, measure yourself against everybody else, because sometimes a map can be difficult for everybody. So you sort of gauge, okay, where am I in the pack? And just because you had a bad start, it doesn't mean that you're done for the entire game. Diplomatically, I have 2 allies, 1 enemy, 1 neutral party, and a cyborg. So I'm not quite sure if he's an enemy yet. We'll see. So I think this is where you can sometimes make up for a poor development early on, and that's with your diplomacy. So you reach out, get help from people, work with people, trade ships, help them, that sort of thing, and it can sort of boost what you're missing, if that makes sense. So that is my turn 20 evaluation. I'm off to a very rough start. Keep a lookout for part 2, because I'm going to compare my results in this game to some of my previous games, my beginner games, some of my better games where I won, and I'm going to compare it to an Emperor game as well. Alright, so I hope that helps, and I'll see you out there.